Millions of Americans are at risk of being evicted. Every first of the month since COVID-19 hit, folks have been late on rent, not paying their rent, or have had to move out of their housing, creating an already existing housing crisis, making it much, much worse. And it could very well lead to cities collapsing, markets being disrupted, and of course, this is all related to COVID-19 and how the economy has been affected with the loss of jobs and people being forced to scale back on work. This is unprecedented times, but people are looking for resources. They want to understand what legal protections they have and what the government is doing to protect them. Luckily, a new project, the COVID-19 Eviction Defense Project, is one of, thank goodness for their work. Good people out there who want to address these issues. Zach Newman, he is the co-founder. He is an attorney, and he's here to tell us a little about what's happening and how we can defend ourselves. So Zach, what inspired you, first off, to start this group? Because it's a great project, and it's really great to see people step up and want to help folks out.
Yeah, I don't think this is what we were planning to be working on in July, August of 2020, but I practice law. I do eviction cases and debt collection, representing people who face those kinds of issues. And March 31st, I was seeing a lot of chatter on Facebook about people not being able to pay their rent. And so I put a message up and I said, hey, if you're having trouble paying your rent, if you're having issues with your landlords, if you want legal advice, drop me a note, post something on my wall, let me know. Happy to represent you. Didn't think much of it, went to bed, went to work the next day, woke up, kind of had a normal day, and then got on Facebook around 5 o'clock, and I had 500 messages. And I was stunned. And I said, there's really something here. I'm shocked, maybe I shouldn't be. A friend of mine, Sam Gilman, and I started putting together some economic modeling on what we thought the crisis might look like here in Colorado where we live. And the data pointed to hundreds of thousands of people. And so the project kind of grew from there. We started representing people in these landlord-tenant cases. We got a little more sophisticated on our economic analysis. We built the housing fund. And so this project has really grown out of the COVID moment and just responding to the housing crisis it's created.
It's crazy because we've already had such weak housing laws protecting tenants. Can you just give us a little backstory on where we stand in tenant protections, just sort of on a national, basic understanding of where we are? Obviously, it's state by state, it's different. Just to be very clear, there are different rental laws per state, but just a general vibe of do these laws protect tenants or do they protect, the landlords?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, laws obviously vary by state, and some states are more landlord friendly. Some states are more tenant friendly. There's a wide range of laws and policies in place. But I think generally in the United States, if you have an extended period where you're unable to pay your rent, you have very few defenses and you're likely facing eviction fairly soon. In some places like Colorado where we live, that can happen in under a month. And then in places like California and New York, you've got a bit more time. But generally speaking, if you're unable to pay, then the eviction process moves fairly quickly around the country.
And right now, what is the projection nationally? What are people saying in terms of how many folks are going to be evicted?
So the numbers are bleak. It's a really dire picture. Our project, along with the Aspen Institute, published our number. And in June, we were projecting 19 to 23 million people at risk of eviction in the United States. That number has subsequently gone up, and other academics, other think tanks have published numbers all higher than the one we've published. So we're looking at a real crisis here, and it shouldn't be surprising. The majority of Americans have less than $1,000 in savings. They're unable to weather a 3-month crisis, and we are now in month 4 of a crisis. Federal benefits are basically ending. And so, I don't think it's surprising that you would see a very large swath of Americans suddenly unable to pay their bills.
So let's just talk through, what happens when somebody's evicted. Generally speaking, if you haven't paid your rent for, let's say, if you're a New Yorker, haven't paid in 3 months, you get an eviction notice. How soon do you have to respond? What do you have to do next?
So this really varies state by state. I didn't even know what the New York rule was until you said it just now. I
think that's it. I'm not sure. I'm just using it as an example. Yeah. I'm just using it as an example. So.
Sure. So it really just depends on the jurisdiction and the state you're living in. Here in Colorado, the timeline moves incredibly swiftly. You don't pay your rent on the 1st. Normally, there's a 10-day demand period where the landlord is required to accept rent or you have to leave. After that, your ability to stay is really at the discretion of the landlord. And, the court dates follow quickly. So the normal eviction timeline here is anywhere from 25 days after non-payment to 45 days, depending on a lot of different factors. In other parts of the country, it moves more slowly, so tenants have more time. But again, generally speaking, we have a housing system that is based on a fairly stringent set of rules so that when tenants are non-paying, they have to move fairly quickly.
And then when they have to go to courts, I imagine right now the courts are just, if the courts are even open, right? Because we've had, COVID, you going into an actual traditional court, maybe it's virtual, probably depends on where you are. But I imagine they're being flooded and that attorneys are being flooded. And what if someone can't afford an attorney? What happens next in this process?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's hard to talk about because I think legal representation is so important. It's so important to get an attorney. It's so important to understand what your rights are. Go to your local legal aid or legal services office and seek that counsel out. That's number one. But I also do want to make a broader policy point here, which is the way most of these laws are written. If you are a non-paying tenant, in the long term, there's not a lot an attorney can do for you. They can buy you time. They can help you negotiate your way out. But if you haven't paid your rent in a couple of months and you're unable to pay, odds are you're going to be facing eviction. And so attorneys are important, counsel is important, but the laws that those attorneys are operating under really aren't to the benefit of tenants in a lot of situations.
So what happens when a person's evicted? How does it affect their lives?
Yeah. It depends on the person and their family situation. For some people, this is disruptive, but minimally disruptive. They move in with family, they're able to get back on their feet. That's the best case scenario. For people who don't have that option, they're moving into a hotel. If they have access to some cash, they're moving into a homeless shelter, they're moving into a vehicle. And when you take the population group of folks who've been evicted in years prior and look at them, you see 3 or 4 things. One, you see that someone's ability to keep their job after being evicted goes down. 2, you see that their health, both their individual health and their family health, goes down. 3, if they have children, the ability of their kids to stay in school, to study, to get good grades really falls off a cliff. And then the 4th, which should be concerning the state and county governments, is that the costs that those people then cause for counties and states go up dramatically. It's not cheap to have a large homeless population in a city. There's more emergency medical care. Homeless shelters are inexpensive. There's higher risk of institutionalization. And so those costs really start to add up. So in a lot of ways, this is a very expensive problem on the back end, oftentimes for just, $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 in unpaid rent.
Not to mention right now, if you do have children and it's summer break now, but if they're evicted during the school season, these are kids who have to learn from home right now. And for those who are watching or listening that have children, you know very well how hard it is already to teach your kids from home and get them situated and have everything in place. I don't even know what it's like if you're dealing, if you're homeless or if you've been evicted or if you're going from place to place or in terms of credit, in terms of how it affects someone's finances, what are the consequences of eviction?
So having eviction on your record is extremely damaging to your credit. It makes it hard to rent another place. The odds that you're then renting from a slumlord or a bad actor or renting informally go up dramatically if you can find housing at all. But I think what's interesting in this system and less talked about is a number of people who face eviction but aren't actually evicted, but instead just move out of the property. So they get a notice on their door or they get something in their mail and they say, I'm never going to be able to pay. I don't really understand what's going on. I know this is probably going to be bad for my credit, so let me just put everything in my car, leave, call the landlord and let them know. So when you see an eviction filing number, it's actually a trailing indicator of the number of people who've been displaced, because the rational thing for a lot of people to do is just to leave and avoid the court process and the credit rating issues altogether.
Thanks for watching and listening to the Nomiki Show. But remember to click like and subscribe on YouTube and please share on social media. If you're not already a patron, please join us for as low as $5 a month on patreon.com/The Nomiki Show for early and special content. That investment makes a huge difference. We are not corporate media raking in the dough. It's really you guys that are keeping us going. So please consider being a patron. And to our current patrons, thank you so much. We are incredibly grateful to you. We also now have swag. So check us out on the nomikishow.com to get your mugs, your totes, and your stickers.